Hi there, my name is David Batsoffen and I host a travel blog called Travel and Things. Today I'm in conversation with Craig Allenby, who, when I first met him, was at the Pretoria Zoo. But when I spoke to him just before starting this conversation, he tells me he has a new title with lots of letters of the alphabet in it. So, Craig, good morning. Welcome to you. Where do we find you now and what is your new official job title?
Oh, good morning, David, and good morning to the listeners in that. My name is Craig Allenby, as you mentioned, and I'm with the South African National Biodiversity Institute. That's an incredibly long title. I'm the Director of Marketing here. So the show has just come to an end after I just introduced myself. But SANBI is the organization responsible for biodiversity policy, conservation of plants and animals. So it's got a very big mandate that it fulfills. So the zoo is still part of SANBI. So I still got my connection to SANBI. And the zoo, of course, I've been with the zoo for so many years. That's quite one of my passions in life still.
So, well, you can answer that question for me. How long have you been with the Pretoria Zoo?
29 years. It feels like a lifetime some days. I've seen people come and go. I've seen animals arrive, some crises, but it's been a good 29 years. Something
So,
that it's one you don't regret doing in your life.
yeah. So are you still based at the zoo or have you moved into sort of a government office now?
Fortunately not. I've got a beautiful scenery. I'm in the botanical gardens here in Pretoria. So I
Ah,
get to see a multitude of birds, some dussies, some hares. So it's an interesting environment. It's quieter than being at the zoo because the zoo, as you know, is in the CBD.
yeah.
So it sometimes gets a bit lonely in this office.
I think you must put stuff on the walls, Craig. Make your mark. Those walls look far, compared to my study, those walls look terrifyingly blank. Can I come and
Oh,
rearrange the office?
oh no, we're very corporate here, David. No, things are where they're supposed to be.
You've got to love that sort of stuff. Can I put up no, got to leave the walls blank. Got to look
Yes,
efficient.
and your cup may only stand here, and you have to use this pen. Well, I suppose that's how systems work. Otherwise, they fall apart. But yeah, I could do with a bit of color in my office.
Yeah, I don't even see curtains on your window. Or are there blinds at least?
Now we've got some blinds there, and if the
Okay.
lights go off, we've got sensors for the lights, so they switch off if there's not enough activity. So I might just do a Mexican wave while we're doing this broadcast.
I know that feel. You sort of sit there and then the lights, and you've got to do that to get the lights to go back on again.
Exactly.
Talk to us about the zoo. That's specifically why I wanted to chat with you, because I love the Pretoria Zoo. I think it's one of the best in the country, and I know there are people who are anti-zoo, like the anti-vaxxers. But without zoos, there are species that wouldn't be on this planet anymore.
Well, that's very true. Let me give you some of the background of the zoo. The zoo was established in 1899 on the 21st of October. So it's just gone 120 years old.
Wow.
But the history buffs on your show will know that the 21st of October, 1899, the year was a very significant year in the history of South Africa. That's when the Anglo or the South African War broke out. And a lot of animals that were destined for European and North American zoos actually got stranded. So they ended up being donated to the Transvaal Museum. I can't pronounce the Dutch for it, but it was donated to them. And their then director, Dr. Gunning, wasn't very keen on killing animals for trophy purposes. So he got a little bit of civil unrest happening in the area. He canvassed all the neighbors around the museum area to complain about the noise and the smell. And eventually the government gave in and gave him a farm called Rustenburg. And that's when the zoo started officially. So 120 years in the making.
But the zoo has changed a lot in that 120 years, gone from the old traditional barred cages to new environments which are replications of where the animals would be found in the wild rather than them just pacing behind bars in a darkened cage.
That's correct, David. Zoos worldwide have well, let's say the good zoos around the world have followed an evolutionary pattern. It started off with a real menagerie type of enclosures. That's exactly what you spoke about. Enclosure is not a good word. A cage is a better word. So they had concrete floors and these huge bars in front of them. And they were originally kept by the aristocracy because they had the money and they went out and had animals collected for them. So it was purely for their benefit. And then eventually they allowed the general populace to come and have a look at the animals. Using the concrete and that was the knowledge they had at the time. It was very simple and easy to keep clean. But of course, it wasn't a very stimulating environment for animals. And the National Zoo was one of the leading zoos in the world to do the transition from being a menagerie into being into this more natural environment. It's called conservation centers. So where you have more than one species in an enclosure, trying to mimic the natural environment, because that's also very important for the general public. You know, they don't, people generally are lazy. They don't want to read your boards and that. So if they can see the natural environment in which the animal occurs in, they've learned something. So that's what conservation centers are. But now zoos are moving on to the third phase in their existence, and that's called where they focus on the entire environment, but research is a critical component of it. So we now look at the genetics of the animals, we look at the genetics of in situ populations. Now, in situ populations means animals that are occurring in the natural environment. So we would, for instance, go to Kruger National Park and get blood samples from them and be able to do genetic work on them to see what the inbreeding coefficient is, you know, that they're not too related. So the science has become a very crucial part of what zoos do. So traditionally, zoos have had four mandates. It's conservation, education, recreation, and research. So the research component has become incredibly important. So at the National Zoo, what we do in terms of research, we do genetic analysis. So it's become mandatory for some species to be exported to have the genes analyzed to make sure that they indeed come from captive environments as claimed. For instance, the sun gazers. There were huge trade in sun gazers, and people were saying, no, they're all captive bred. But we know at the National Zoo it's incredibly difficult. There was no recorded evidence of a sun gazer being bred in the zoo until recently, about a month ago, 2 months ago, we had one born at the National Zoo. But we can now do on a lot of species, we can do the blood work, the genetics, and actually tell you where that animal comes from. So we now become the agency for the South African Police Service where we do all their forensic work. So if there's an animal being slaughtered, or they find body parts or eggs somewhere in the vehicle eaten away, we'll do the test from them. We will say, right, this animal, this tail of this lion comes from this pride in this area. So the science at zoos are becoming incredibly sophisticated.
It's an area I knew nothing about. Thank you for that. It sounds fascinating. But you know, Craig, I remember back when I was in the army years ago, 1970, I visited the Pretoria Zoo. And there was a chimpanzee cage that was huge, and it was barred, and it was ugly, and it was all the wrong things back in. It was right for the 1970s, but it's not right now. And I know that you've changed, but there was some guy standing outside the cage teasing one of the chimpanzees, offering him food. And if you remember, there was quite a distance between the humans and the front of the cage. And they were showing him a banana or an orange or something, and then, you know, teasing him and then turning away. And at one particular point, they turned, and that chimpanzee picked up an enamel mug and hit one of the guys on the back of the head. It was the best shot I have ever seen. And what does the human want to do? He now wants to climb over the fence to tackle the chimpanzee.
Well, we know who's going to lose that battle.
Oh, I tell you something, he would have had his face ripped off. But I thought, and then the chimpanzee just went to the back of the cage, sat there and went, "This who did is, young. That's how we do it."
Talking about that, David, one of the worst things to do in the zoo is to walk around with a veterinarian, because the animals associate him with the dart gun, and especially the primates. So you get pelted with a lot of feces. I just refuse to get in the zoo. I'll do my own thing and we'll meet up afterwards.
Yeah. What is one of your best recollections of your time at the zoo?
Oh, I think it was, yeah, it was actually a period in the zoo. There in the early 90s, actually the whole 90s was a very exciting period at the zoo because we were busy with major refurbishment, changing of enclosures. New animals were coming in. So that was rather an exciting period. But a specific incident also that was really great was when we worked with the Israeli embassy and got some gorillas to come in from two zoos in Israel, one from the Jerusalem Zoo, the Biblical Zoo, and the other one from Ramadan. So that was really an exciting time because we hadn't had gorilla for a number of years. And then we also brought in two pairs from the Zurich Zoo. And it's amazing to see the difference in personality between the two groups of gorillas. Israeli ones are far more arrogant than what the Swiss are. They are very more sedated, quiet.
Well, that's the Swiss. Did they arrive with chocolates and Swiss Army knives?
Toblerone.
Yeah.
And we've had some crisis events at the zoo as well, which were very memorable. 2012, when our black mamba got out of its enclosure, Houdini was dubbed by one of the newspapers. That was a very interesting time.
I should
We got
imagine
so
so.
much, phone calls from the States, and so they get the timing wrong. So I'm in the shower getting a phone call from a journalist trying to do an interview, and that was a good time. And
Did you find it?
Yes, we did. Yes, it just went up into the trees as we suspected. So we found it back in its enclosure, and we know for a fact it's our mamba that got out because he had a little kink in his tail, and somebody had established a Twitter account for the black mamba, and Houdini was very offended to have the kink in its tail portrayed. So he was very offended by the fact that we referenced his kink in his tail.
Have you ever had any of the larger animals escape? I know that certain zoos do drills where they'll have staff members running around in a lion costume and then get captured. And I always wondered about that because lions don't react like that. You can't judge what an animal's behavior, or I don't think you can judge exactly what an animal's behavior is going to do compared to a human in a costume.
Yeah, you're very right. Doing emergency drills in zoos standard because animals do get out and people need to be able to, first of all, the conservators need to try and minimize the risk to the general public, but you've got to keep the public safe. And you're very right. You can't, animals are erratic. One must always remember that a wild animal remains a wild animal. We have a hands-off approach at the zoo, so that means we don't actually physically work with him. We don't scrub off the back of the elephants and groom the gorillas and that. So they are wild animals. So you've got to train for the eventuality. And the eventuality you're doing is something is coming out. What is the easiest way for us to minimize the risk to both staff and to the public, but also to the animal as well, because it plays a key role. You don't want to have to shoot that animal, rather to try and find a way to either get it back naturally into its enclosure. A lot of the primates in that will have a bit of fun outside, but you can track them back in with a trail of fruit or something and get them back in their enclosure. So that's a key component of it. But we've had some fun with that as well, David.
Have you? In what way?
There was a time the chap was actually a parole violator. And he had come to the zoo because the ancestors had told him to come and collect some lion cubs. And he got onto the wall of the enclosure. So that took some time to talk him off. And then we had another chap that actually came and got into the lion enclosure. He was trying to commit suicide. But what was fortunate for him is that the lion she had had a meal today. So what she did was she just dragged him into the tree. And every time he did a bit of a scream, she just slightly bit down on him. But again, the lion was fine. The man was slightly shaken afterwards. Yeah, but fortunately, we never lost anyone in the.
I'm sorry,
But that was,
we shouldn't be laughing, Craig. I mean, the poor guy must have been in a really terrified state to try and commit suicide by jumping into a lion pen. But that's why there's the Darwin Award. It's to remove people like that from the
exactly,
gene pool.
exactly,
I,
exactly. Yes,
I'm always saddened when people do stupid things in zoos, like stick their hands through the bars of a cage, get their arm or get a hand taken off by the animal that they're trying to touch. And then the zoo puts the animal down because humans are supposedly of more value. And I'm going, no, if the human was stupid enough to do stuff like that, they deserve every moment of pain, every moment of discomfort that they get caused. And the animal's not at fault. As you say, it's a wild animal. Yes, it's in captivity, but that doesn't change its natural instincts at all. And if you stick a body part through there, they see it as food and they're going to bite down on it.
yeah. Well, they see it as something novel.
Yeah.
They're used to a thing called environmental enrichment, where they get new things into the enclosure to stimulate their natural behavior and to prevent boredom. So they're just seeing it as that, there's something new and let's see what it is. And as all animals, your pets at home, the teeth play a great role in them exploring their new toys,
Yeah.
and they'll bite them. So exactly a wild animal as well. Even if it's been fed, this is something novel and in this enclosure, it's going to explore what it is.
Yeah.
So we're
Did you?
fortunate we've never had to do that in the past.
Well, that's great. And it's good to know. Did you have what during your 29 years at the zoo, did you have a favorite animal, an animal that you visited on a daily basis that you could say, hello, this is me, and I'm glad you're still alive, and I'm so happy that I can sit here and spend time with you?
Yes, there was one. And I think it's because it's as weird as I am. That's the okapi. I love the okapi because for your listeners or viewers that don't know what an okapi looks like, it actually looks like it's made from the leftover pieces of various animals. So it's got the neck of a giraffe, the body of an antelope, and right on its rump at the back, it's got black and white stripes like a zebra. So really it looks like there was a bunch, okay, there was a neck left, here's the body left. Beautiful, beautiful, velvety
Mm.
fur, and then this rump of stripes. And they're so majestic and calm. So they were really my favorite. And it's a pair that we got from San Diego Zoo.
Now, you also at one stage, I seem to remember, brought in Komodo dragons. Are they still at the zoo?
Yes, the Komodo dragons are at the zoo. And it's just a very, very interesting story. The Komodo dragon that we received from Indonesia, the bloodline was so important to the captive environment, and we could not get it to breed at the National Zoo. So we sent it to a zoo in the Leicester Zoo in the UK because they had quite success on it. And they sent us back a pair of Komodo dragons. And these Komodo dragons that we received was born from or hatched from a female who had never been with a male. So that's very interesting. So there's a natural process where they can actually change their genetic, their sexual structures and that. So that's
Wow.
it's an odd occasion, but yeah, so
It's
these two are kind of a miracle animal.
I was going to say, it's almost like virgin birth. And we know what
Yeah,
happened
exactly.
the last time that occurred.
Indeed, yes. So what was I going to mention on the Komodo dragon again? Oh yeah, they can store sperm for a number of years before they actually use them.
Okay.
So it's possible that at some stage she may have come into contact with the Komodo dragon and have kept that sperm till she believed it was a right time. The animal world is an amazingly incredible creation.
We think we're the top of the food chain, well, the top of the intellectual chain, but we're not. If everything is cleverer than us in nature, Craig, even the trees have an intelligence that we don't credit them with.
Yeah, I think we're very easy to downplay the role of the world outside just because we don't share a common language. We believe we're superior to them. But I think there's still a lot that we've got to learn from the natural world there.
Yeah.
But that we can only do through studying and getting to understand it. That's why, we need a lot of young people to get excited about conservation start working in the environment, doing the research that's necessary, and of course, seeing how are we going to mitigate climate change, because that's
Yeah.
a major storm waiting for us in the future. We might not be around here, but for the
Craig,
futures to come, big thing.
is there still the aquarium at the Pretoria Zoo? I remember diving in there when I was with a particular radio station. We did I think, an outside broadcast, and I ended up in the tank.
Yes, we still have them. The moment we've got black-tip sharks in them, there's three
Okay.
black-tip sharks. So they're really nice to come and see. They look like a formidable shark, the same shape, and then these black fins, or white fins, these black tips on them. Very, very pretty sharks.
I know that the bears, you were talking about enrichment. I know that you gave the bears sort of frozen lollies with all sorts of interesting things in them for the bears to play with and discover. Do you do that for all the species, or are there only certain species that you look to for that?
There'll be a hierarchy of doing environmental enrichment. And of course, it will be the more intelligent, well, what we perceive to be the more intelligent animals. So the primates and that, they would become very easily bored. So we do environmental enrichment, but we try across the zoo to do enrichment. We've even done environmental enrichment for the fish, where we put a CD dangling like a mobile, dangling in their enclosure, so they get to see all these funny lights and their reflections. So that's a bit of enrichment for the fish. But you know, talking about the bears, one of their great favorite environmental enrichments was to have Greek salad dressing sprayed into the enclosure. That was the ultimate for them. They loved having Greek salad dressing in their enclosure.
But how did you discover something like that? It's always like with the first bungee jump. I've always wondered, that first New Zealander that jumped off a bridge with a piece of elastic strapped to his leg, going, this could work, and then it didn't. So how did you come up with Greek salad dressing, for goodness sake? I mean, that's so left of center.
Well, that's how creative our conservation teams are. They do all these weird and wacky things, working in within a certain budget, and they try and stimulate different things. So, for instance, the balls, the enclosures for that would be to keep them busy with the movement and that. The ice lollies that you were talking about was thrown into the water, and that was to mimic actually fishing. So they get to fish in that. The Greek salad dressing was to stimulate their sense of smell.
Okay.
So it's always to try and prevent boredom within the animals.
Now, up at the top of the zoo, where the lion enclosures were, those old lion enclosures that you looked down into, are they still there, or have those animals too been moved to new premises, for want of a better word?
The lions are in the northern part of the zoo, which is on the mountainous part. So you actually look onto their enclosure, them
Right.
and the tigers as well. So it's lovely to see them laying amongst natural grasses and that. And they've also got certain patterns. During the day when it's very hot, they'll go and lay upstairs, at the top end of the enclosure. And then they know, they can hear the food car arriving. And then you'll see them come running down for their food. They obviously get habituated to certain behaviors and times and that. So they've learned that this sound of this bucky means food.
Yeah.
And all of them come down, and we alternate in the feedings. One day would be the lions, the next day would be the tigers. Because like us, not too much movement, we put on a bit of kilograms.
Yeah.
So that happens to animals as well. That's why we've got these very rigid diets for them. That's why we don't want the general public to feed the animals.
Yeah.
Because first of all, they don't know what the animals eat. And second of all, we've got the risk of what we call zoonotic diseases. Those are diseases that are transferred from humans to animals. And one such is the common cold. But the big risk that we have in zoos are TB. TB is a big problem.
Really?
So we encourage people, which somebody that's suffering from TB will take a bite of his apple, saliva remains in, throws it into the enclosure, the primate eats it, and voila.
Yeah. Craig, is the zoo currently under lockdown like the rest of the sort of tourist attractions, or can people go to the zoo?
No, the zoo is closed at the moment. Oh, we've been, just wanted to sneeze, David.
It's all right.
Oh,
Bless
excuse
you.
me. Thank you very much. The zoo's has been closed to the general public since the lockdown, but it's been operating from level 5. So we are waiting to hear from the various ministries when either all natural environments will open up to the general public, or they're going to open all attractions to the general public.
Yeah.
So we are also dependent on government and their decisions.
Because I think everybody is chomping at the bit to do something. I mean, when people say to me at the moment, what are you doing? I said, I'm a non-traveling travel writer, which is not easy. I got to keep finding content on a daily basis out of archival images that I've taken over the last year or so to come up with stories. So I was hoping that the zoo is going to be open soon so that I can at least tootle up the Ben Skuman and come and spend the day there and then do a story about it at some stage.
Yeah, I think, the zoos and the botanical gardens will be opening in not too distant future because, there are large areas, there's sufficient space to do social distancing. And there's a great demand, for instance, for people to go and walk at Kirstenbosch. They really want to go and walk it, and they're getting quite excited at us. Some people don't realize that we're just as everyone else dependent on government regulations. So they accuse us of being lazy to implement COVID prevention mechanisms, and we're all horrible people. But I think we're frustrated at being locked up at home.
Do you think the animals are missing the humans? Has the staff noticed any difference in their behavior?
It's a question that's been asked before. And one thing I think one needs to realize is that animals become habituated to humans. So they get used to seeing people on a daily basis. So sometimes, it's easier to feed the penguins now because people can get quite close to them. But in general, the behaviors remain relatively the same.
Okay.
We're not having the lions sing Kumbaya or anything like that.
You don't know. They're doing that whole Madagascar thing. They're trying to find a way out of there, and the penguins are just smiling. The penguins are just smiling and waving. You have no idea, Craig. None. They're scheming. Late at night when they get together, they're forming coalitions there that have never been formed before. The Pretoria Zoo version of Madagascar.
Yeah.
Craig, I want to thank you for being my guest on In Conversation With. It's good to chat to you. I wish you guys all the very, very best going forward. And I do hope that the Pretoria Zoo and all the zoos and public spaces that fall under your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your bailiwick at the moment are open soon so that we can get out and about and start enjoying nature once again.
No, thank you very much, David, and thank you for the interview.